Hey everyone, Sev here. Bit of a different kind of card game we're doing. Recently, not really recently, got more into Magic as I went to college, mainly because Yu-Gi-Oh wasn't really around me at the time. That was before I got like a consistent means of transportation to go long distances. But this is my Mothman deck profile, deck tech, whatever the Commander community calls these things. Um, the Wise Mothman is a deck I honestly this is like when the Fallout precons came out a few years ago. This was the first one I bought, and this one was the one that I was most excited for. Just kind of getting into Magic the Gathering. It was Fallout was just the set was amazing for me. Like absolute wet dream was the Mothman, was the Fallout set, and now I own all four of those precons. I own the Caesar one, the Science, the Dogmeat one, and obviously the Wise Mothman. Recently, in the past few months or so, been kind of getting more into upgrading the Wise Mothman and kind of taking it from a really good precon to a really good deck. And the Mothman is, in my opinion, its playstyle is somewhat unique for Sultai, which isn't saying a whole lot because it is still a lot of graveyard good stuff and stuff like that. But he synergizes well with a lot of Sultai commanders. Um, I guess every Sultai commander synergizes well with Sultai commanders, but um, the Wise Mothman was personally my choice for a Sultai commander, especially after the release of when Tarkir Dragonstorm came out and the Taval Precon came out. I was actually interested in the Taval Precon because I figured, it looks pretty fun. It can probably mesh well with Mothman. And I didn't end up picking it up till about 5 or so months ago when I saw it was reprinted at one of my LGSs. And I knew I had to have it. I knew because this precon was hot, it was gonna go, so I bought it, and ever since then I have not regretted buying it, as the Wise Mothman has been beautiful. Obviously, this is the super rare, the secret layer drop printing of the Wise Mothman in foil. The art is starting to grow on me. But yeah, enough talking about needless stuff. So starting off with the phase commander, the Wise Mothman. Whenever he enters or attacks, each player gets a rad counter. And whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, where X is the number of non-land cards milled this way. The rad counters kind of serve as a alternate form of mill in this deck. You'll notice there's not a lot of rad counter facilitation in this deck, as Mothman, unless you want to specifically go for a more rad counter build, the Wise Mothman is kind of all the rad counter generation you need in this deck, as he can consistently, by just simply existing on the board, create mill and create rad counters. But generally, you do want to get more spells to protect the Wise Mothman, as he does kind of become quite a bit of a big target on the board, as I've noticed from playing in different pods and whatnot. But moving on to the rest of the 99, we have Taval the Balanced Scale. Basically just similar to the Wise Mothman in what he's trying to do, which is getting benefits off of milling. He just does it more directly than the Mothman does, and does it, in my opinion, faster, in a way that ramps cleaner too, as you can bring back any milled land. You can bring back any land from your graveyard, and also you get a 2/2 black zombie for it. But in general, if you want to run Taval in the command zone, you could play the Wise Mothman in the 99. You can flip him out as you see fit, but personally, I'm a huge Fallout fan, so the Wise Mothman is going in the command zone. But that does not mean Taval is bad. Taval is very good. And then next, here is one that's honestly, if you're looking to make more competitive adjustments, the Master Transcendent is honestly one that you could cut. When he enters, target player gets 2 rad counters, and you can tap him, put target creature in a graveyard that was milled this turn, onto the battlefield under your control. It's green mutant with base power toughness 3/3. Genuinely, when looking at different ways to view decks and get other ideas, when looking for like the master deck, um, genuinely I just ran into the problem of, well, why wouldn't I just play a better Sultai commander? And unfortunately, that is what the master kind of suffers from, is his color identity is kind of what holds him back, as the things he does, other Sultai commanders just do better, and it's a less investment to put in than the master would be. So if you want to make more cuts for more competitive cards, or more cards you find enjoyable, whatever that be, the Master Transcendent could be one that you could consider up on the chopping block. I wouldn't say he's like the number one card from this profile. I would say you would cut. I'd say there's more cards in the deck that you'd be a lot better off cutting, but he definitely is a little bit extra for not the worth. He's not really worth the investment, I should say. And then next, another card that does exactly what the Master does, but better, is Muldrotha the Gravetide. This is like the third most popular Sultai commander in the game, and basically just reads, during each of your turns, you can play a permanent card from your graveyard of one type each turn. So like you can just, your graveyard kind of becomes your second hand, and that's why Muldrotha is so good, and why things like the Master are kind of outclassed by Muldrotha, and even Taval for that matter, as the Master can only recur back creatures, Muldrotha can recur any permanent, and Taval can get back lands and get replacement zombie creature tokens for your troubles. So Muldrotha was definitely a necessary pickup. I picked him up a few weeks ago, and will probably never leave the deck, as it would be kind of foolish to do so. Next up is Kotus Sibsig Champion. Basically just a budget version of Muldrotha the Gravetide, as he can play, once per turn, he can play any creature spell from your graveyard. You just have to pay its mana cost and exile 3 cards from your graveyard. And then he kind of has like a pointless +1/+1 counter effect on him at the bottom. You're not playing him for that, really. You're playing him because at the time you couldn't get a Muldrotha. But still, when Muldrotha's out of reach and you have Kotus is a good substitute. You load your graveyard pretty quickly in this deck, and it's a great way to kind of get rid of cards that you might be clogging up your graveyard, or you might just want to be getting rid of. Next, on to our Golgari creatures, we got Colossal Grave Reaver, an absolute bomb. When this creature enters or attacks, you mill 3 cards. Whenever one more creature cards are put in your graveyard from your library, just put them onto the battlefield. So you do a lot of milling in this deck, so when this card kind of goes off, you're kind of basically just playing from your graveyard. And there's a lot of times where I find myself kind of running low on resources in my hand, because I'm just putting all of them in my graveyard, but I'm able to recur them, so it's not like a huge issue. But Colossal Grave Reaver is definitely a good reanimation target, as 8 mana, even in green, is quite the hefty cost, but not the worst. And then next up, we got Corpse Jack Menace. Basically just doubles the amount of +1/+1 counters a creature would get. Synergizes well with the Mothman. Actually came in the Mothman pre-con. So, yeah, honestly, I think the only thing really holding this card back is the mana cost. The mana cost being 4, when there's other doublers that are less, just feels bad. Next up, we got Winding Constrictor. Basically, this not only doubles +1/+1 counters on creatures, this also doubles counters that you get, so it doubles your rad counters instead of just doubling all the counters your creatures or artifacts get. And again, for 2 mana, it's pretty reasonable and actually very good. Next up is Agent Frank Horgan. This is one that is honestly kind of iffy. It's 7 cost, and that is a lot. And frankly, Frank Horgan He's all right. Again, it's kind of similar situation to the Master. Like there's so many other cards in this deck that do what Frank does, but better and more cheaply. So if you wanted to give him a cut, then that is more than fair. Um, but personally, he's not first up on my cutting block solely because he has indestructible as long as he doesn't attack, and he proliferates twice when he enters. And like you can just use this as like a big body to block things. The next is Winter Cynical Opportunist. Another mill engine, but also his delirium effect is honestly a great way, again, to recur cards from the graveyard and to kind of get cards that you're not going to be using out of the graveyard. Kind of keep things, moving almost, and keep things that you mill but you want to get them back. Nightkin Ambusher is one that I would honestly say that you could cut and there would be zero consequences, as his main purpose is to distribute rad counters, and he only does that upon entry, and he only gives himself cannot be blocked as long as defending player has a rad counter. If that last effect was like I don't know, tap 2 mana and target creature cannot be blocked as long as defending player has a rad counter, he would be like crazy, but obviously that'd be a little bit too broken. So if you want to cut something for, I don't know, some game changers, some tutors, Nightkin Ambusher would probably be one of the first ones to go. Raoul Troubleshooter is honestly, he's pretty good. I actually really like Raoul. He mills on tapping and also serves as a little bit worse version of Muldrotha, as once per turn you can cast any spell from your graveyard that was milled this turn. Again, he's a little bit worse than Muldrotha because Muldrotha can get multiple permanents, but Muldrotha can only get permanents, whereas Raoul, if you mill an instant or sorcery that you want to use, you can actually use it with Raoul, but you only get that one. Next up, we have Sir Conrad the Grim, or as he's known in this card, Golbez Clad in Darkness. Basically, this is a card that mills for 2 mana. Whenever something leaves the graveyard or is put into the... Wait, is it leaves? Whenever a creature card is put into the graveyard, and whenever a creature card leaves the graveyard, Sir just burns everyone for 1. Again, just another graveyard kind of support card. You put a lot of cards in the graveyard, so this card can get a lot of uses out of it. But if you're not a fan of this strategy, you definitely don't need to play them. But personally, I really like putting cards in my graveyard, plus he mills a card for 2 mana. That's very affordable. Next up is Hancock Ghoulish Mayor. Personally, I've really enjoyed this card. Each other creature you control that's a zombie or mutant gets +X/+X, where X is the number of counters on Hancock. And he also has Dying, so if you just hard cast him and don't put a counter on him, you can use him as a sack outlet, bring him back immediately, and all of a sudden he just pumps all your other zombies or mutants by 1. And you can kind of use him as like a cheaper version of the Ozolith by putting all of your counters on him, but still pumping like your Mothman or your other zombies or mutants if you want to go for a more zombie or mutant heavy strategy. But overall, I'd say Hancock is one that is well worth the inclusion, especially if you like a little bit of lore, I suppose, in your Magic the Gathering experience. Next is Dauthi Voidwalker. This card is insane, especially in a deck that can mill your opponents as well. You can kind of rip some of their key pieces before they even get the chance to play them. And I've used this card in order to save me in various situations. Like I've had someone try to pop Mothman when Mothman was big enough to where it could have, killed someone, and I used Dauthi to bring back something that gave Mothman indestructible, and it was at instant speed, and it just completely caught someone off guard. Generally, you don't use this as a beat stick, but you honestly could because of its shadow ability. but Dauthi Voidwalker is a hell of a card. Next up is Strong Brutish Thespian. Personally, this is also one that you could cut. The main reason I keep it is because he kind of turns around the negative side of radiation, i.e. you lose life when you lose the counter. But honestly, I personally don't think that kind of replacement effect for 6 mana is really all that worth it. So Strong, if you want to cut him, you more than likely can. I mean, there's not really much else on here that I would say is worth running with Strong. And then Tato Farmer is basically just another smaller way to get rad counters on ourselves, but also the main reason why I'm playing him is to get land cards that we mill. Because if we don't have access to the Vault, we're kind of losing out on that graveyard advantage that we would normally get from Taval. So this is kind of just a bootleg version of Taval almost. It just requires you to tap him instead of attacking. Cathedral Acolyte, I've made since buying the Mutant Menace Precon, I kind of had a huge turnaround with. Because at first I was like, this card sucks. Why would you play this? I'm cutting this as soon as I can. But each creature with a counter on it has Ward 1. Kind of makes players it catches players by surprise because it doesn't when people read Mothman, they see, oh, he's very vulnerable. But if you have Cathedral Acolyte and Mothman has a +1/+1 counter, they might not have the extra mana to pay the 1, so their destructive removal or targeting removal gets countered. So, and plus, it's a pretty fun way to distribute +1/+1 counters to any creature that enters in this turn. So usually that could be Mothman, it could be anything in the late game even. The glowing one is also, again, I would say he's a little better because he costs less. Again, has that replacement effect for the he actually has a better effect than Strong does. Whenever a player mills a non-land card, you gain a life. And then whenever he deals combat damage to a player, they get 4 rad counters, and he has Death Touch. So I'd say he's really good as a blocker, or a way to get back your life that you're losing from all your radiation counters, because sometimes it can get kind of out of hand. Vexing Radgol is honestly one that I would say could honestly get the cut if you didn't like it. Because whenever he deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 rad counters if they don't have any rad counters, otherwise you proliferate. Again, we have a lot better proliferators in this deck, and honestly, Radgol is still in here because he's a 2-drop. You can't go wrong with the 2-drop, really. I mean, Mirelurk Queen is honestly pretty good, as whenever you mill a non-land card, 1 or more, you draw a card and then put a +1/+1 counter on Mirelurk Queen. Just another way to get more advantage into your hand as you're milling more and more, especially as this deck gets its engines going. Hand advantage can sometimes be kind of a struggle as you're putting a lot of your cards in your graveyard and hoping everything goes well and you can get them back out with your various other recursive spells. Diviner of the Mist came in the Taval Precon, and this card is amazing. Basically, mill 4 when it attacks, and you can cast an instant or sorcery spell from your graveyard with mana value 4 or less. Again, this kind of covers up the hole that Muldrotha leaves where she cannot bring back instant or sorcery cards, but Diviner of the Mist can, especially if you mill some really, really crazy reanimation pieces, like Reanimate, for example. Diviner of the Mist can bring it back, and then you can bring back a creature. Of course, at the cost of exiling it, but that's not really a problem. So next up, these two are kind of just in tandem, just generic mill pieces, both with landfall triggers. Hadron Crab and Ruin Crab. Basically, when Ruin Crab is on the field, you play a land. Each opponent mills 3 cards. And then Hadron Crab, you can specifically target a player. So you could target yourself and you could mill yourself 3 cards. Which more often than not, if you have these 2 on the field, you mill everyone else 3. And with Hadron Crab, you mill 3 yourself. So those 2 are just some pretty good mill engines for the deck. Next up, we got Find and Finality. I don't think I've ever used Finality ever. Find is quite commonly used because it's, for 2 mana, return 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Great way to mill card or get back cards that you milled that you didn't want to mill. And then Finality is alright, I guess, but like for 6 mana, I wouldn't say that's worth it. Next up, we got Casualties of War, just a generic good sort of multi-targeting destruction in Golgari colors. With this, you can very easily like level out a playing field and put it back into your advantage, as you can just destroy literally almost an entire player's momentum with just playing this one card. Next up, we got our Cultivate, just generic green ramp. I mean, can do a pretty good job of making sure you can play your lands and keep lands steady, as sometimes that can be a problem, even though we are in green. Life from the Loom is where things get honestly just crazy, as instead of drawing, you can mill the top 3 cards of your deck and add this back from your graveyard to your hand. So you can just kind of consistently get Mothman to get +1/+1 counters and just honestly go crazy with this card. And you can recur your lands back with it, so it's not like you're like paying the total cost of milling a bunch. Farseek, again, is general ramping. Same thing with ramping growth. You like to have lands, so. Next up, we got Victimize, just a good reanimation piece. Sacrifice a creature, return 2 target creatures to your graveyard tapped. Nothing wrong with that, especially if you play it for free off of something like Raoul or something like that. Insatiable Avarice is basically just a budget tutor card, as you can put 1 card from your library, put it on top, and then if you pay with 2 black as well, you draw 3 and lose 3 life, which generally isn't that big of a cost. Then Reanimate, simple good stuff. You just reanimate a big bomb and all of a sudden you kind of upturn the whole table, really. Nuclear Fallout is one that if you wanted to cut for a different board wipe, you could. I personally like it because A, I'm lazy. It came with the Fallout Precon. It's a pseudo board wipe. Distributes rad counters. We love to see it. So, personally, I think Nuclear Fallout is just an A-OK card. Atomize is honestly, it's okay. I wish its cost was lower, but I wouldn't say the cost is so high that I would think about cutting it. Personally, I think Atomize is just an okay removal spell. Its proliferation is what makes it a real all-star in my opinion. Putrefy, removal, nothing wrong with that. Mutational Advantage, this just protects all of your creatures with counters on them. And also it's a proliferator as well, so again, pretty good, mainly a pretty good protection piece. Although I would pair this with something like a Fog, which can prevent damage dealt to you as well. So Biomass Mutation, this is a card I would cut personally. I don't think it's really worth playing all that much, because if you're putting, in order for this card to be worth it, you need to put a lot into it, and if you're putting that much into it, what could you have done else? Like, unless this was like the only card in your hand, you probably could have done other things that would have been much more productive with that mana that you could have put in. But again, kind of lazy. Personally, I would cut this for something like the Seaborn Muse, as it can combo a lot with a lot of your interaction, and also Mariposa Military Base, as you can just draw a card every turn. It gets a little bit weird, a little bit crazy. Inspiring Call is, again, a way to basically just ramp, as you can draw a bunch of cards off of it, and also protect your creatures, as creatures with +1/+1 counters get indestructible. So that's always very cool. And then Terra Sunder is a non-destructive removal spell. Especially if you kick it, you can basically just exile any card your opponent controls. It's not even any card your opponent controls. You can just exile any card. Unlikely you're going to do your own, but go for the throat again. A quick, cheap, instant removal spell. Been around for years, I think. But I think that was the one I got in the. I want to say in the Will Help Precon, and then Lethal Scheme. I found out is a lot better from a game because you can actually pay off the colored mana by tapping creatures, and I didn't even know that. Basically, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Each creature that can invoke the spell connives, and then you draw a card, discard a card. If you discard a non-land, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Yeah, Lethal Scheme is kind of crazy a little bit. You can just use most of your board to pay for it, and you don't even need the mana for it. And you can do some crazy stuff. Radstorm is, I would say, if you didn't have Diviner of Mist, I would cut this card, as there's again, for 4 mana, there's a lot, when I'm playing, there's a lot better things I think I could do with 4 mana on my turn than just playing Storm, because if you want to get the most benefit from it, aka using the Storm part of its effect, you want to play other things before you play it, so then you can proliferate multiple times, kind of cascading down almost. But by the time you get to the point where you'd want to Radstorm, usually you're very low on mana and you can't actually play this card. But with the Diviner of the Mist, you mill this card in a previous turn, you combo off a little bit, you attack with Diviner, you cast this card, and all of a sudden you can just proliferate a ton, as the Storm will stack on top of itself, causing you to cast copies of it. Ripples of Potential is a proliferator that also phases out creatures. So say if you have something that can get around destruction protection, Ripples of Potential will phase it out, basically dodging the non-destructive removal. This also came in Secret Lair, as you can see, as it looks gorgeous. It'll Quench Ya is just a simple targeting spell that basically says target counter spell unless its controller pays 2. 2 mana, it's pretty alright. Onto the artifacts, we got Mind Crank and Mesmeric Orb. Basically, Mind Crank mills opponents for the amount of damage they took. And then Mesmeric Orb says whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. So again, these two cards, when combined with each other, can mill opponents like crazy, and Mothman can occur counters, and really necessary pickups. There's a good reason why these were very expensive for a long time, and I still think they hold at least a little bit of their value post reprint. Next, we kind of got some not really generic, some equipments that kind of help the strategy. Whisper Silk Cloak basically just makes it to where it gives Mothman some protection, and makes it to where when you swing with him, it's gonna guarantee connect. There's a better card you can play this. It's Brotherhood Regalia. I just don't have it with me right now, as I'm home for spring break for a little bit. Next up, we got the Power Fist. I found out a few days ago that this card is $15 in a card shop I was in, and it's understandable, as equipped creature gains trample, and when this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Basically, if you swing and it's not blocked, you can basically just double the amount of +1/+1 counters on Mothman. Really insane equipped card. Next up is the Water Crystal. This is essentially a pretty neat opponent mill card, kind of to create a smoke and mirrors type effect. If the opponent's like, oh, he's milling me with the one crab that everyone else mills 3 cards. This guy's milling me 7 cards just by playing lands. I got to deal with that instead of trying to deal with the Mothman that has 30 +1/+1 counters on it. It'll be a good time. Plus, it reduces blue spells, and we play a decent amount of blue in this deck. Next, we got some mana rocks. So you got your standard Soul Ring, your Arcane Signet, and our 3 talismans. Curiosity, Resilience, and Dominance for each of the Golgari colors. Next up, we play quite a bit of enchantments in this deck. It's actually kind of surprising a little bit. First up, we got Branching Evolution. Again, a cheaper way to just create +1/+1 counters and double them. This with some other +1/+1 counter doublers goes crazy. Guardian Project is a way for us to reward casting creatures and get cards back into our hand that we use to obviously cast those creatures. I would say this one is a solid stay put. Like, if you're looking to cut this card, your deck is beyond the point. Like, you're looking to get into C80H territory. And then Forced Evolution, Vault 87. I would say this is one that you could honestly cut, as it being a saga is a little bit on the slow side to get to that draw effect, and sometimes taking a creature isn't the greatest unless you have a sack outlet to deal with it. But honestly, again, wouldn't be that high up on the totem pole, but it is on there. Fraying Sanity is also one that can get a little bit crazy, as beginning of each end step, enchanted player mills X cards, where X is the number of cards in their graveyard that was put there this turn. This can get kind of crazy because you can easily put, on a really good turn, you can put 20 cards in your graveyard. That doubles up, so now you're putting 40 in your graveyard, and Mothman unfortunately cannot stack multiple +1/+1 counters on himself. So it gets a little bit crazy. Again, I'd say this one is up on it's on the totem pole. It's not very high up there, but if you're looking to play more, more expensive stuff, more competitive stuff, Fraying Sanity is definitely one you could go with. Cutting Black Market Connections, again, is just more ramp, creating a treasure, drawing a card. Nothing wrong with that. Phyrexian Reclamation is just a way to recur creatures from your graveyard back to your hand. And as a 1-drop, is a pretty good turn 1 play. You just, play either a black land or like a command tower, and boom, Phyrexian Reclamation. You have some board presence. Inexorable Tide is a card that when it goes off, it works. It does wonders, as you can cast in really good turns in late game. You can cast a lot of spells and proliferate a lot of your +1/+1 counters very, very quickly. However, when it's not those, it feels kind of bad playing this card. So I would say this is also on like the cuttable. It's a really good spell, don't get me wrong. If you play this in the right deck, this would be amazing. I just don't think that this is particularly the best strategy that can utilize this card. But it still is kind of crazy, even in this deck. If you're looking to cut room, I wouldn't say this would be the first card you'd look to, but eventually you would probably come across this card and say, you know what, I don't think this is very useful. Hardened Scales is beautiful. It's a 1-drop. It doubles the amount of counters put on that creature. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Tval's Judgment is just another form of ramp, because we get a lot of cards out of our graveyard. Tval's Judgment basically rewards us for doing so, giving us card draw, treasure tokens, or zombie druids to just sacrifice off for some, like a victimized play or something like that, or use as blockers. Next up is where a lot of my decks are kind of weak, is the lands. So starting out with the kind of multicolored or potentially colored lands, we have Command Tower, Opulent Palace, Path of Ancestry, Unclaimed Territory, and Exotic Orchard. These two I would say are pretty essential if you want to stay budget. These two you could kind of cut. Exotic Orchard, I'd say it's an alright land, usually. Usually you can come across a matchup where they have at least one of the land types you're looking for. These two, on the other hand, are not the greatest, as we're not really focusing on a mutant type strategy. As we're not really a typal deck. This is a a mill with +1/+1 sub theme deck, and so therefore types are not really our highest priority. So something like Unclaimed Territory and Path of Ancestry are kind of not really serving a really great purpose. We do have some mutants in this deck, but that's not our main goal. So if you wanted to cut these for other better utility lands, I would see no wrong in that. Next up, for some of our Dimir dual lands, we have Tainted Isle, Fetid Pools, Sunken Hollow, Temple of Deceit, and a Choked Estuary. I personally hate Choked Estuary with all of my being. But overall, I'd say these lands are okay. I'd say the worst one is definitely Choked Estuary, in my opinion. But if you want to play different ones, if you have more expensive ones, go right ahead. I'm not going to tell you no. Personally, whenever it comes to upgrading a deck, I never think to upgrade the lands. I just, shiny cardboard that isn't a land, I think of that first. Only playing 2 Simic lands, which seems kind of weird, but we also have quite a ways to bridge these 2 colors. So it's not like we're missing on a whole lot. So Temple of Mystery and Hinterland Harbor, both pretty good lands. I'd say Temple is the worst out of the 2, but I'd say pretty solid lands, as Temple allows you to get some information, and Hinterland Harbor has a way for you to bring it in untapped. And then 3 Golgari lands, the Temple, Woodland Cemetery, and Tainted Wood. Again, solid lands. I'd say Temple is the worst one because it has to come in tapped. But overall, I'd say these are all very solid lands for what they are. Then next, for the black lands, I'll start with the more utility ones. Mortuary Mire always kind of feels bad, in my opinion, to play because you're playing it tapped and then you're putting a creature card from your graveyard to on top of your library. And if, depending on your setup, you could end up just milling that same card again, which never feels great. And then, of course, Bojuka Bog. This one also feels kind of bad, to be honest. When I play it, I almost never hit a player when it's needed. I think I've done it a total of 2 times throughout me playing this card. But we never give up on Bojuka Bog. And then next are the basics. Whole bunch. Swamps, islands, and forests. I think I'm playing 5 of each, which is a pretty solid ratio. It's the ratio that came with the Fallout Precon, obviously, because they're all the Fallout lands. But, I'd say even as, if you wanted to, kind of delve more, get more depth out of your land, I'd say 5 of each is a good solid ratio to start out with. Next, we got our budget fetch lands, Terramorphic Expanse, and Evolving Wilds. They're alright, especially when you get ways to recur these back off of winter, and you have your crabs out. You can easily just mill people a lot during your end step, and it's beautiful. Ash Barrens is just a cycling land. If you need an actual colored land, you can cycle this, get whatever basic you need, or if you just need it for the colorless, always do that as well. Now, these 2 are both more utility lands. Nesting Grounds can move around +1/+1 counters and finality counters, because we do play winter. That is an issue you sometimes run up with. And Mariposa Military Base can get us rad counters, but can also draw us cards. And the 5 cost gets reduced by 1 for each rad counter we have. And we can get a lot of rad counters. So that is all for my Mothman deck profile. Let me know what commander decks you guys are playing, what kind of techs you like, what kind of, if you're playing Mothman, what kind of stuff you guys play in there. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.